Hey folks, this is Astus from Astus Guides, back again with another Baldur's Gate 3 class review. Man, it's been so long since we've done a class review, but we've got patch 9 now, and that means the Paladin class. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time, so let's dive into it. Here we are in character creation, and we can select the Paladin class. We're going to start, as we always do, by talking about hit point progression and base proficiencies. Paladins have the 1d10 hit point progression, which I consider a good hit point progression. To me, 1d6 is low, 1d8 is average, 1d10 is good, and 1d12 is great. 1d10 is equivalent to what fighters get and what rangers get, which is enough to be a frontline durable unit. So we're happy with the 1d10 hit point progression. For saving throws, Paladins get Wisdom and Charisma. This is decent. Wisdom is a great saving throw. Some of the most debilitating effects in the game target Wisdom, so being proficient in that saving throw, phenomenal. Charisma is extremely forgettable. It's probably the worst saving throw in the game, but it's one of our minor 3, so we'd prefer it be swapped with Strength, but Strength isn't even that much better. There aren't a lot of effects that target these minor 3 saving throws, so that's fine. Once we get to weapon and armor proficiencies, Paladins really get everything we could want, because they actually get everything. They get all the armor, light, medium, heavy, shield proficiency, and all of the weapons, simple and medium. So there's only one other class in the game that gets that. That's the fighter, and it's kind of more important for the Paladin, to be frank, because unlike the fighter, Paladins really need this heavy armor proficiency. Because when it comes to their attributes, they're spread very thin, so it's expensive to expend the points needed to buy a 14 dexterity, which is the dexterity you need to fully utilize medium armor. Paladins, unlike fighters, kind of want to dump that dexterity stat to 8 or 10 and just wear heavy armor instead. So awesome proficiencies, good saving throw proficiencies, good hit point progression. That's all really great for Paladins. But of course, what really defines a class isn't these base stats, it's what abilities they get. And the Paladin base class gets a lot. I think there is 5 or 6 features that the Paladin base class gets. Several of them it gets at level 1, so let's just dive right in. First off, Lay on Hands. Lay on Hands is a single target heal. It's melee range and it takes an action. The way Larian has implemented it works very differently than it does in tabletop. So I'm just going to take a second to explain. Lay on Hands in Baldur's Gate 3 works off a charge system. You're going to start at level 1 with 3 Lay on Hands charges, and then you're going to get a 4th at level 4, signaling to us, I think, that the rate of progression is you're going to gain a charge every 4 levels. So at level 4, level 8, level 12, and so on. Now, how much a Lay on Hands charge heals is determined exclusively by your Paladin level. I believe it is 2 times your Paladin level. So in the tooltip here, it's displaying 4, but ignore that. It's 2 times your Paladin level. So by level 5, a Lay on Hands charge will heal 10 hit points. However, when you use Lay on Hands as an action, you can choose to expend up to 2 charges, but no higher than 2. That means at level 1, if we expend 2 charges as an action, we can heal 4 hit points. By level 5, if we expend 2 charges as an action, we can heal 20 hit points. So you can see it starts scaling quite a bit. What else is there to say? Oh yes, you can also choose to expend 2 charges to remove all diseases, which I can't think of any diseases in this game. With the 100 of hours I played Baldur's Gate 3 EA, I can't think of any diseases. So, but also removes the poison condition, and that does happen every now and again. there's that versatility there. You can either heal hit points or remove the poison condition with 2 charges. All of that is confusing. Here is the takeaway from this. Compared to tabletop, Lay on Hands heals quite a bit more when it comes to the total value of hit points healed, but it heals less if you consider how much healing you're getting per action spent. That means it's worse from a in-combat perspective, but better from an out-of-combat recovery perspective. And to me, that means we've kind of traded up here, because Lay on Hands was never actually that efficient of an ability when you use it in combat, because it takes an action, so it's competing with just making an attack. And with a striker class like the Paladin, you'd prefer to just use that action, making your attacks, and only heal people with Lay on Hands after the combat is over. So altogether, this is a pretty nifty team support ability. It's going to give you some more recovery outside of combat. Alright, that's enough on Lay on Hands. The other feature that they get at level 1 is Divine Sense, and this is also drastically changed from how it was, or how it is, in tabletop D&D. Divine Sense in tabletop D&D is an out-of-combat kind of information gathering ability. I guess Laren thought it would be a lot of work to code in all of this option for gathering extra information into the game, and I can understand why completely. And so they've changed it to be kind of a minor in-combat buff. So as a bonus action, once per encounter, a Paladin can use Divine Sense, and for 2 turns after using it, he will have advantage on all attack rolls made against Celestials, Fiends, and Undead. That's a decent ability when you're fighting Celestials, Fiends, and Undead, and of course useless when you're not fighting them. Altogether, it's not something you'll never use, because the action economy on it's very low, it's just a bonus action, but still not that impactful when you use it, and there's a lot of times you just won't be using it at all. So it's nice, but not making a big difference for the Paladin base class. So that's it for level 1. Now let's jump over to level 2. So here we are at level 2. At level 2, Paladins get... First off, we're going to start off with the small things. They get a fighting style. This is the same as fighter fighting styles or ranger fighting styles, only like ranger, your list is kind of contracted. For the Paladin, you get 4 options for fighting style. Defense, which gives you +1 to your armor class. Dueling gives you +2 bonus to damage if you are only using a single one-handed weapon. Great weapon fighting, this one's interesting, especially for Paladins. With great weapon fighting, when you roll a 1 or a 2 on a damage dice, you get to re-roll that 1 or 2, but you have to keep whatever your new roll is. So it's possible to roll 1 and then a 1 again, right? But still, this does boost your damage quite a bit, especially if you are stacking a lot of damage die on your attack. And Paladins have a very important way of getting a lot of damage dice, which we'll talk about in a second. So just remember great weapon fighting. Oh, and great weapon fighting, you have to be using a weapon in 2 hands. So there's that. And then the 4th one is protection. Protection is extremely interesting to me. It imposes disadvantage on attacks. As a reaction, you impose disadvantage on attacks made against allies within 1.5 meters of you, or 5 feet of you if you use the feat system. It doesn't cost a resource except for your reaction. So on tabletop, my experience is that protection is seldom used because it requires you to be chained to one of your friends to use it reliably. But that's not really a big problem in a single player game where you're controlling every character. You could 100% build a character around protecting an ally without it really stealing all of your fun. And you know, what this is giving you, disadvantage on attack, is actually quite good. Let's move on to the second feature that Paladins get at this level, which is spellcasting. Paladins are 1/2 casters, which is like a technical way to describe a certain kind of spell progression. It's spell progression that is equal to the ranger, identical to the ranger, just a different spell list. Basically what it means right now, at level 5, you will be getting 4 first level spell slots and 2 second level spell slots. So pretty good. However, the really important thing isn't exactly your spell progression as much as it is your spell list. And the Paladin gets some really interesting spells in its spell list. I can't talk about all of these. I do want to mention a few and then some of the more unique ones to the Paladin. The first one that should stick out to us is Bless. If you are a regular viewer of my videos, you will know how good Bless is. It's one of the best team buffs in the game, and it requires your concentration. Now, usually, clerics are on Bless duty. They're the ones casting Bless, and they kind of forget about all the other concentration spells they have in their list because concentration is taken up casting Bless. But now with the addition of the Paladin and some new cleric spells, you can offset that Bless duty onto the Paladin, and the cleric can use their concentration on Spirit Guardians. Because Bless is so good as a concentration spell, any of these other spells, if they require concentration, even if they're good, you're probably never going to cast them because concentration is always going to be spent on Bless. So spells like Heroism, Divine Favor, Protection from Evil and Good, Shield of Faith, good spells, but we're not really going to talk about them because they're competing for concentration with Bless and they just lose out in that competition. The one I really want to talk about is actually what's considered a feature instead of a spell, and that is Divine Smite. Divine Smite is technically speaking a base class Paladin feature, and it's a feature that uses spell slots as a resource. But a class feature that uses spell slots as a resource is basically a spell, and I find it really useful to understand Divine Smite if you think of it as a spell. So, Divine Smite is a level 1 spell that you cast on an attack. Actually, you cast it after you have hit an attack, and when you cast it, it will add 2d8 radiant damage to the damage of that attack that you just hit. And if you choose to upcast Divine Smite, it will add an additional 1d8 for every spell level over first that you cast it in. So at this point in the game, we can only upcast it as a second level spell, in which case it'd be adding 3d8 radiant damage. This is why I was saying great weapon fighting is so interesting for Paladins, because I have tested it and the game right now will reroll 1s and 2s on your Divine Smite damage if you're taking great weapon fighting, which kind of, in my mind, catapults great weapon fighting to the best and the kind of optimal fighting style choice for Paladins, but of course, defense and protection are still very good options. Returning to Divine Smite, you can think of it as being free as far as action economy goes. Because if you were just a fighter, you would be spending your action to make attacks, and Paladins are going to do that. But if they hit those attacks, they can then expend spell slots and just add damage to it for free without anything added in the action economy. And if there's one thing I've been saying over and over in all of these videos is that 5th edition is an action economy game. So Divine Smite, in my mind, it's an absolute S tier spell that is exclusive to Paladins, and it's a class-defining feature for them by far. It's just so fun to do. Everyone loves those crits where you're already doing 20, 30 plus damage on your crit, and then you're doing another 20 plus damage in Radiant on top of that, and just 100 to 0 target. It's hilarious and it's fun. And it's so fun that it's actually pretty easy to overrate Divine Smite. I mean, I've rated it, it's S tier, so I'm not saying that it's not extremely good, but another rule for all turn-based tactical games is that proactivity is better than reactivity, and saving all of your spell slots for a crit is a very reactive way of using those spell slots. So by all means, save a few spell slots for Divine Smite, but do keep in mind that even a Divine Smite on a crit, it can be overshadowed by proactive use of some of these other spells, like, say, Command. Anyways, that is level 2. Let's go to the next Paladin feature that they get at level 3. Level 3 is actually a much more important level for Paladin subclasses, but the base class does gain one feature at level 3, and that is Divine Health. Divine Health makes you immune to disease. As I said before, I don't think I have seen a single disease in Baldur's Gate 3 Early Access. So really, I think this is basically a cosmetic thing. Maybe on full release there's going to be diseases that this will make us immune to, but for now, you can basically just forget it. And we can move on to level 5. So finally, at level 5, the Paladin base class gets its last features. 2 of its last features. The first is Extra Attack. With Extra Attack, you get to make a second attack when you take the attack action, effectively doubling the value of your attack action. There's no nuance here, it's just an extra attack, but that is incredible. And then the second thing that Paladins get at level 5 is second level spells. And if we look at their list of second level spells, it's a very short list, and it's a very short list of pretty average spells, to be honest. Aid is good, we've talked about that with the Cleric video. Branding Smite is situationally quite good because it prevents a target from turning invisible. That can be amazing, but it does require concentration, and this is the problem with a lot of Paladin spells, is any of them that require concentration are getting muscled out by Bless, as we've said. So besides the bonus spells that you get from your subclasses, which we'll talk about, the base class spells are mediocre, and you're spending a lot of second level spell slots just upcasting Smite. So that is all of the features that the Paladin gets. What does this mean for its general rankings? Well, I'm sure you already kind of know what I'm going to say here. Paladin is an S tier base class, hands down. If you compare what the Paladin base class gets to a Battle Master, you can really see how strong this class is, because it compares very well to a Battle Master. Both of them get the same starting weapon proficiencies, they get that fighting style, that extra attack, they get a single target heal, it's second win for the fighter, lay on hands for the Paladin. They're different in the way they function, but still comparable in power. And then they both get spells, kind of. The Battle Master gets its maneuvers, the Paladin gets its spells. Paladin spells at 5th level are slightly weaker than Battle Master maneuvers. Actually, I'd say they're pretty comparable in power, except Battle Master maneuvers refresh every short rest. So the Battle Master does have an edge there. And then Battle Masters get the Action Surge ability, which Paladins don't get. So comparing these two, a Paladin is like a Battle Master fighter, but without Action Surge, and with spells that refresh every long rest instead of every short rest. Slightly weaker. However, Paladin is a base class. We haven't even gotten to the subclasses yet, whereas the Battle Master is a full base class subclass combo. This is a overloaded base class. I couldn't give it anything else other than an S. So now we have jumped back to character creation, because Paladin subclasses, the way that Larian has implemented them, you choose them at level 1 instead of level 3 as you do in Tabletop. Paladin subclasses are called Oaths, and at level 1 you can select between the Oath of Devotion or the Oath of Ancients. There's a third hidden oath called Oathbreaker, and you unlock it if you break any of these 2 oaths. Breaking the oath means doing something against the kind of character of the subclass. It's honestly not that hard to do. Just do something evil, and that'll usually do it. Anyways, we're going to cover all 3 of the subclasses, starting with the Oath of Devotion. Now, the main thing that oaths give you is your Channel Oath feature. Channel Oath is like Channel Divinity that the Cleric gets. It's like a spell slot that can only be used to cast special spells called Channel Oaths, and it refreshes every short rest. And what spells, quote unquote, you can cast with your Channel Oath feature is entirely decided by subclass. You unlock 1 at level 1, and then 2 more at level 3 so far. So we're going to talk about all of those. The other thing that subclasses give you is bonus spells that you always have memorized at levels 3 and 5. For the first level spells and second level spells respectively. But beginning with Channel Oath. The Oath of Devotion's level 1 Channel Oath is called Holy Rebuke. When you cast Holy Rebuke, you cast it on an ally. It applies a buff to them, which lasts 2 turns, and this takes an action to cast, by the way. For those 2 turns, when an enemy hits them, that enemy will take 1d4 radiant damage in retaliation. 1d4 is kind of low, but potentially you could have a lot of targets hitting you. I think an optimal situation would be casting this on a Moon Druid in bear form who uses the taunt to tank as many hits as possible, to deal as much damage as possible. But remember, this is taking an action. The damage that Holy Rebuke is going to deal is very likely less than the damage that you are going to deal just by making an attack, especially after level 5 once you get extra attack. So in the end, I find Holy Rebuke to be not that good. It's pretty rare. It's better than just making an attack, so overall pretty underwhelming feature. But for the Oath of Devotion, the really good channel oaths that it gets at level 3. So at level 3, Oath of Devotion get 2 new channel oaths and 2 bonus level 1 spells that they have learned. Let's start with the spells. First off, they get Protection from Evil and Good. This is a spell we've talked about before. It's a good spell, but you'll honestly never cast it because it requires concentration, and that's going to be spent on Bless, so don't need to say anything else about that. The other bonus spell they get is Sanctuary, and Sanctuary is actually a pretty good spell. Doesn't require concentration, so that's nice. It's very good for controlling aggro, and it costs a bonus action to cast. You know, sign me up. So Sanctuary is useful for sure. Then for the channel oaths, they get Turn the Unholy. This is something every Paladin subclass gets a version of Turn Undead, but it's tailored to their particular oath. And for the Oath of Devotion, they get Turn Unholy, which will turns a unique status condition. It's basically like Frightened, except enemies will run away from you, and when they run away, that does proc attacks of opportunity, so very useful. Turn Unholy works on fiends and undead, so pretty good. That's useful when you're fighting fiends and undead, but against anything else, it's just doesn't do anything at all. The really big feature that Oath of Devotion get, and this is the reason why you would pick this subclass, is their Channel Oath Sacred Weapon. Sacred Weapon is a self buff, and it takes an action to cast, so you do have to spend a turn to cast this. However, once you've cast it for the next 10 turns, irrespective of concentration, you apply this Sacred Weapon buff. Sacred Weapon buff allows you to use your Charisma modifier. It adds your Charisma modifier to your attack rolls. Attack roll is the die 20 roll you make to decide whether you hit or miss. So this doesn't add Charisma modifier to damage, but adding it to attack rolls is already insanely good, because it's adding the Charisma modifier to the attack rolls, as well as the normal strength or dexterity modifier you would use. So you're adding 2 modifiers. This is like adding for 10 turns a +3 or a +4 to your accuracy. That's on top of Bless, and that's on top of your normal proficiency bonus and strength modifier. For most builds, this is overkill for accuracy, but if you are building an Oath of Devotion to use the Great Weapon Master feat, it's basically offsets that -5 that you get from Great Weapon Master. And right now, Oath of Devotion Paladins can just leave the Great Weapon Master all in, toggled on, and still reliably hit even the highest AC targets in the game. I'm talking the Bulle, I'm talking Bernard. It's absolutely incredible. You just dish out so much damage with Sacred Weapon. The only downside is that you have to spend an action to get the buff. So you lose an attack in order to gain all of this accuracy on your other attacks. If you're casting Bless, then you're losing another attack as well, and losing 2 attacks at the beginning of combat really adds up. So you want to cast at least one of these, Sacred Weapon or Bless, before entering combat. If you can cast both of them before entering combat, you're golden. Anyways, this, in my opinion, this is an S tier feature all the way. It completely changes, what you're capable of as a paladin, and really makes the Oath of Devotion Paladin one of the better options in my mind. Alright, last thing to discuss for Oath of Devotion is the bonus spells that they get at level 5. And I don't actually have a level 5 save for the Oath of Devotion, so I'm just going to tell you. They gain Lesser Restoration and Silence. Both of these are situationally good spells, but they are definitely not, build defining in any way. It's useful to have them, but you're still going to be spending most of your level 2 spell slots just upcasting Smite. So that is the Oath of Devotion. Now let's give it a ranking. What do I think? I give the Oath of Devotion an A tier ranking, and all of that is because of Sacred Weapon. Pretty much this whole subclass is all about getting Sacred Weapon because Sacred Weapon is that good. You pick this subclass if you want to be dealing 20 plus damage on every hit and hitting every time. And that is enough to make this an A tier subclass. Next up is Oath of the Ancients, and I'm not going all the way back to character creation for this because I actually want to show you how this ability works. The tooltip does not describe it very well. So at level 1, Oath of the Ancients gain the Healing Radiance Channel Oath ability. Healing Radiance is a AoE heal. You can see here it's going to heal allied targets in this small AoE around me. It heals them by an amount equal to your Charisma modifier times your level. So you can see right now, this character has a 17 Charisma and is level 1. So Healing Radiance will heal every ally within the small area by 3 hit points. Oh, and I forgot to mention, it takes a bonus action to cast, which is pretty nice. But here's where it gets tricky. Healing Radiance actually pulses twice. Watch. There's the initial heal, and then when my next turn starts, you will see it pulses again. So it's actually twice as much as the tooltip says. There's just a lot of multipliers on this heal. That's what I'll say. There's a lot of multipliers on it. First, you start with the base number that is determined by your Charisma modifier. Then it's multiplied by your Paladin level. Then the healing amount is multiplied per target that you hit with it. And then times all of that by 2 because it's going to pulse twice. It's a lot of healing. And all of that is on a bonus action. So you will actually be using this fairly often in a fight. And then finally, on top of all of this, you can combine Healing Radiance with all of the equipment in the game, which applies buffs on heals. So pretty easily in this game, you can get items that, for example, make targets who have been healed resistant to physical damage, or who apply the Bless effect on targets who have been healed. And this is probably the best ability in the game for applying those effects, because if you're using Healing Word, you're doing it on a bonus action, sure, but it's only to a single target. With Healing Radiance, it's costing a bonus action, and you can spread those buffs to potentially every member of your party if you position right. I mean, you can think of this as like a melee range, but AoE version of Healing Word that refreshes on a short rest. That already makes it S tier. And then the fact that the healing is actually a lot, it pulses twice, it spreads all of these unhealing buffs potentially to your entire party, and doubles their duration because it's pulsing twice. It's just incredible, guys. This, honestly, it's too much. I feel like Larian should nerf this ability because as it is, it's just really, really, really efficient. So Healing Radiance, incredible S tier. ability for the Oath of the Ancients. Let's look at what else Oath of the Ancients get. At level 3, the Oath of the Ancients are going to get 2 bonus level 1 spells and 2 bonus Channel Oath abilities. We'll start with the spells. They get Speak with Animals. Speak with Animals is an extremely fun but entirely RP spell, so to me it's a selling point of this class, but it's not actually adding anything from a mechanical combat perspective, so we can't really discuss it here. The other spell that they get is Ensnaring Strike, just like the Ranger first level spell Ensnaring Strike. Now this is a spell that Paladins wouldn't otherwise get. You can only get it on a Paladin if you choose Oath of Ancients. However, it's not that good of a spell. It's decent, but it requires concentration, and as we've said now for the 100th time, anything that requires concentration for the Paladin is just going to be suboptimal compared to Bless. Maybe though you're running more than one Paladin, someone else is casting Bless, in which case, sure, Ensnaring Strike is a decent spell. Going now to their Channel Oaths, they gain Turn the Faithless. This is their version of the turning spell. For Oath of the Ancients, they can turn Fae and Fiends. Already in early access, there are some high-level Fae encounters, and we can expect that there are going to be a few high-level Fiend encounters in the game, just judging from the plot so far. So this seems like a pretty good turn Channel Oath. I'm happy with this one. The other bonus Channel Oath ability that they gained is Nature's Wrath. Nature's Wrath is interesting. It's a kind of short-range, single-target CC effect. You can use it on one target within 3 meters, and they make a strength saving throw. If they fail that save for 10 turns, they are restrained, and they do not get a saving throw to try to resist. They get one chance. It's make or break. And if they fail, they're restrained for 10 turns without any concentration. So that's a long time to be restrained. With the restrained condition, they cannot move. Attack rolls against them have advantage. Their attacks have disadvantage, and they have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. But really, what this is useful for is you landed on one target who only has a melee attack. And then for 10 rounds, you can sit back and just take pot shots at them until they're dead. To be honest, I haven't used it that much. It's kind of a situational save or suck ability, and meanwhile I can just be using my Channel Oath on that kind of overpowered healing pulse thing that Oath of the Ancients get. So I would say for both Nature's Wrath and Turn the Faithless, these are situationally very good. And then you have that kind of core healing Channel Oath for all of those situations where these aren't best. And then finally, at level 5, Oath of the Ancients are going to get 2 more bonus spells, this time for level 2. Again, I don't actually have a save open for level 5 Oath of the Ancients, but I can just tell you that the spells that they get access to are Misty Step and Moonbeam. Both of these spells are very strong spells that Paladins wouldn't otherwise get. Moonbeam requires concentration, but it's good enough that you might actually want to start using it, put that Bless on somebody else and start using Moonbeam. It's a really, really good spell. Misty Step doesn't require concentration at all, and it's just phenomenal. So both of those spells at level 5, really, really strong and add a lot of versatility to the Paladin class, because most other Paladin Oaths aren't using their second level spell slots to cast spells. So, what do I rank the Oath of the Ancients subclass? I give it an A tier ranking. I think it's roughly on par with the Oath of Devotion, just kind of a different flavor. It's adding much more crowd control and team support and healing, whereas the Oath of Devotion is a sheer striker class. That is the Oath of the Ancients. Now let's discuss the Oathbreaker. Last up is the Oathbreaker subclass, which isn't really an oath. As its name implies, it's a subclass that you get whenever you decide to break your oath, and It kind of represents this edition's version of the Blackguard from previous editions. So, in this save, I have my Oath of the Ancients Paladin, who has broken their oath. I broke it this one by saving Saza from the Tiefling camp. So once you've broken the oath, you'll get this condition down here called Oath Broken. While you have that condition, you cannot use your Channel Oath abilities. And then if you go to camp, you will find this guy over here. This is Oathbreaker Knight, Custodian of the Fallen. Talk to him.
I have been waiting for you.
This will initiate a dialogue where he asks you why you broke your oath and what you intend to do about it.
Your oath is broken.
So, once you get to this point, you can choose that you're ready to become an Oathbreaker, or you can say you want to remain pure, in which case I believe you pay a fee, a gold fee, to retain your current subclass. But we want to become Oathbreakers. It's going to begin a pretty cool sequence, but we're going to skip it. Voila! Now we are an Oathbreaker. And it will give us all of our Oathbreaker features that we've gotten up to this level, which I believe I am level 4 currently. So, at level 1, the Oathbreakers get the Spiteful Suffering Channel Oath. Spiteful Suffering is a single target damage and debuff ability. When you cast it on a enemy target within 3 meters, they make a Charisma save, and if they fail the save, they get this debuff for 3 turns, which causes 1d4 plus your Charisma modifier in necrotic damage every turn. Moreover, you and allies who attack that target have advantage on all of your attack rolls, and that's the big thing. You're mostly doing this to get advantage on attack rolls against a single target. It takes an action to cast, so there's the opportunity cost of the damage you would normally be doing just by taking the attack action, which as a paladin is a lot of damage. So yeah, that's why this damage isn't really why you would use this ability. It's to get advantage on attack rolls for you and your party, and probably against a single target with a lot of hit points, a kind of boss-type character. That's when this will be effective. Otherwise, you're better off spending this action just making an attack. That is Spiteful Suffering. For their other channel oaths, they get Dreadful Aspect. I haven't tested this one enough because it's a little complicated, but what it is a very wide radius CC effect on enemies. In a 9-meter radius around you, all enemies must make a Wisdom saving throw or gain the Frighten condition for 10 turns. Frighten it's an okay debuff. Targets that are frightened can't move. I think that's newly added. This patch that frightened targets can't move. They also have disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. So, not bad. The thing that I haven't had enough time to test with Dreadful Aspect is how often they are re-rolling to overcome this frightened condition. In tabletop, I believe any target that is more than 30 meters away from you gets a chance to re-roll, but the ones that are within 30 meters of you, they can't. No re-roll. And that's kind of a complicated thing. We haven't seen any mechanic like that in Baldur's Gate 3, and I haven't gotten a good chance to test it. So maybe someone can let us know in the comments what the rules are for re-rolling on Dreadful Aspect. But either way, this is a pretty decent debuff. And the big reason is its 9-meter radius. So this was a great control effect when you're facing large mobs. And that brings us to the last Channel Oath feature, which is Control Undead. This is the Oathbreaker's version of their Turn Undead. And it's kind of a throwback to the original Baldur's Gate games, where if you were an evil cleric, when you used the Turn Undead ability, you would control undead creatures that were of a sufficiently lower level than you. It's pretty similar to how this works. Control Undead is a single target kind of charm ability that you can use on any undead creature that is lower level than you. They must make a Wisdom save, and if they fail that save, you are now in control of them until their next long rest. And remember, Channel Oaths refresh on a short rest. So you could potentially get up to 3 or 4 if you have a bard undead under your control in one long rest period. Anytime you're taking control of a unit, that's a really, really cool ability that's fun to play around with. So, to me, Control Undead is the big reason why you take an Oathbreaker. But the problem is, in early access so far, there just aren't a ton of undead encounters. Off the top of my head, I can think of 3. There's the skeletons in the Temple of Jurgle, there's the slightly stronger skeletons under the Apothecary in the Blighted Village, and then there are the zombies that are raised during the Dwegar fight in the Underdark. None of these units are very, they're not very powerful summons. So, building an undead army, this isn't really the feature for it, frankly. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe some of the Myconid thralls count as undead. They aren't enemies, they're neutral NPCs, but you might be able to take control of them. This is the kind of ability that really takes, dozens of hours of testing to really push the limits of its power, but my suspicion, based off what I know about Baldur's Gate 3 Early Access, is that there aren't really good units to steal with Control Undead. But if they do add good units, this would be an NS tier ability easily, and, it could be right now. Let us know in the comments the cool things you've been able to do with Control Undead if there's something I've missed. Moving on to the spells now. At level 3, Oathbreakers get Hellish Rebuke and Inflict Wounds. Inflict Wounds is interesting. It's a single target attack that does a lot of damage. The problem is, it's kind of competing with Holy Smite. Holy Smite deals less damage than Inflict Wounds, but it adds on top of your normal attack. And once you add on top of the normal attack, it is just significantly better than Inflict Wounds. So I don't really imagine ever casting Inflict Wounds unless there's a situation where I am facing an enemy that is vulnerable to necrotic damage, which in early access there just aren't any. So yeah, you'll probably, until we get the full release of the game, you're probably never going to use Inflict Wounds instead of just using Holy Smite. But Hellish Rebuke is a different story. Hellish Rebuke is an interesting spell that I really like, which is cast on a reaction. There just aren't a lot of spells that use a reaction to cast, so it's cool to have one. With Hellish Rebuke, when an enemy hits you with an attack, you can use Hellish Rebuke to retaliate. It takes your reaction and a spell slot. They make a dex save. If they fail, they take 2d10 fire damage. If they succeed, they take half of that, so 1d10 fire damage. I really like retaliation effects. I don't know what to say. I really like it. This works super well in the action economy. It actually does a fair amount of damage. I consider it an A tier spell, so definitely nice to have for the Paladin. And then finally, at level 5, I do have a level 5 Oathbreaker save, but I will just tell you, the bonus spells I get at level 5 are Crown of Madness and Darkness. Both of these are interesting spells in that in the wizard spell list, where you would normally get them, they're good spells that get overshadowed by competing spells which do pretty much the same thing but better. So for Darkness, the competing spell is Fog Cloud, which does basically everything that Darkness does, except it's a level 1 spell instead of level 2. So why would you ever cast Darkness instead of Fog Cloud? But on the Oathbreaker Paladin, you don't have access to Fog Cloud, so getting Darkness is pretty nifty. Similarly, Crown of Madness is a really good Save or Suck debuff that kind of charms a unit and gets it to fight for you, but it's pretty much always worse than Hold Person. And they're competing with each other because both of them target the Wisdom saving throw, and both of them can only be cast on humanoid targets. I almost never cast Crown of Madness, I just cast Hold Person instead, but again, with the Oathbreaker, you don't have access to Hold Person, so Crown of Madness is actually pretty good for them, if it wasn't bugged. And it's been bugged every time I've tested it. I probably haven't casted it since like patch 6, but it was pretty bugged in patch 6. Maybe they fixed it, I don't know. Again, let me know in the comments if you've been using Crown of Madness, and it works. So the bonus spells that Oathbreaker get are nice. None of them are S tier class-defining abilities by any means, but they add a little bit of dimension and utility to the base Paladin class. But the big reason why you pick an Oathbreaker is Control Undead, which sadly for now in early access isn't that strong. So in the end, I give the Oathbreaker subclass a B tier ranking. It's not dragging the Paladin base class down by any means, but it's not adding enough to it to really lift it up an extra tier. So B tier for the Oathbreaker. That's it for the Paladin. Whew, this was a long one. There was a lot to cover here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Have fun playing. I'll catch you next time.